Hello, welcome to the Sponge Castle in Scotland, where I store all my bottles and have all my tasting samples, and a lot of the decisions about Whisky Sponge and what goes into the bottles occur in this very room. Anyway, I hear Hideo is doing a tasting for you. Thank you very much, Hideo. Thank you to everyone in Japan who enjoys our whiskies, who buys our whiskies, and who likes to taste the bottlings we create. I'm very grateful, and it's really lovely for me to think that there's whiskey people all the way over the other side of the world enjoying our bottlings. So the whiskies you're going to taste tonight are, first of all, SPRINGBANK. This is a 1994 single refill hogshead of SPRINGBANK. We bought this privately. This is a private customer. A lot of private customers bought casks of SPRINGBANK in the 90s, and some of them still have them maturing. So this is distilled in 1994, aged for 27 years and bottled at natural cask strength of 47%. So it's very elegant, very fresh, very mature style SPRINGBANK, waxy, fruity, tropical fruits, green fruits, quite coastal, slightly medicinal, a little bit of peat smoke in there. Very elegant and very, very typical of 90s style SPRINGBANK in my view. So really one of my favourite bottlings we've done recently. Very, very good. Then we have NEVIS. So this is edition 58A. It's half of a refill sherry butt of 1996 NEVIS. We're keeping the rest of this whiskey in the cask. We're going to bottle it next year after it's had more than a year of additional maturation. But this is the first half of the cask. We bottled it at 53%, so some reduction from cask strength. And this is a very divisive whiskey. Some people love it. Some people, like Hideo, probably don't like it. So the style of the whiskey is very naked, very raw, very pure. It's very much a distillate-driven style of whiskey. So although it's 25 years old, it actually feels younger. And you have this very, very quite oily mechanical style, quite fat. It's a style I really like, but it is quite an extreme style of whiskey. So it'll be very interesting to see what the other half of the cask is like after an extra year of maturation with more oxygen in the cask, and we'll bottle that one at natural cask strength. So stay tuned for that one. And then after the NEVIS, we've got edition 59A, which is a Highland single malt whiskey. This is distilled in 1993, aged for 28 years in a refill hogshead and bottled at natural cask strength, 44.7. We don't say the name of the distillery on here, although I'm very interested to hear what everyone's opinions are, and if any of you guess correctly what the distillery is, then you'll win my eternal respect. And so this is what I would term an easy drinking Highland style malt whiskey. A nice age, 28 years, good maturity, a very easy strength, so mellow, soft, easy to drink. I often find interesting flavours in this, like cooking oils, peanut oil, sesame oil. I find a very nice, delicate waxiness, and I find it quite dry on the palate. So an easy drinking Highland style whiskey. After that, we go to Islay, and we have edition number 61. So this is a slightly more serious bottling I did. It's a 1990 vintage Islay single malt. The casks are stated Islay single malt on the documentation and on the cask ends, but we don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure that it is Laphroaig though. It doesn't say Laphroaig, doesn't say Ardbeg, but the taste for me can be no other distillery than early 90s Laphroaig. Very, very soft medicinal peat, nice hint of green and exotic fruit, some citrus, very coastal as well, so very fresh, and has a level of maturity and complexity which I think is really beautiful. I chose this label design because as it was a tribute to my father, who passed away a couple of years ago sadly, and the idea was that I would design a label which referenced him and some of our family memories, because he loved Laphroaig. His favourite whiskey was Laphroaig, and this for me is as close as we can get now to bottling named Laphroaig. It's very expensive, very difficult. So I'm very happy with this bottling. Personally, it's one of my favourites that I've done, and I think it's a beautiful whiskey. Distilled 1990, 31 years old, full maturation in a refill barrel, and 51% natural cask strength. So really easy, beautiful, complex, mature Islay single malt. One of my favourite profiles of whiskey. So we go from there to one of our more, not experimental, but fun whiskies that we do. So this is a Glenkeith. It's Whisky Sponge edition number 62. And this is a multi-vintage bottling. So we took two casks for this bottling. We took a cask of 1991, a refill barrel Glenkeith, and a 1993 refill hogshead. So the 1991 was a little more woody, a little drier, a little more waxy. The 1993 hogshead had more freshness, had more exotic fruit. So the two casks mixed together created a really interesting profile. I think it had perfect balance. It has a really harmonious, very complex profile, and a style of whiskey which I think exhibits more old style Speyside flavours. So when I taste it, I think back to maybe more like late 70s, mid 70s style Speyside single malts. And this one we did also at natural cask strength, 51.9%. I'm very happy with how this bottling turned out. I think it was a good example of how we like to play around with different casks and recipes sometimes. So from the Glenkeith to this, the Whisky Sponge Equilibrium. This is a series which I designed to represent the flavour profile of sherry and peat together in balance. It's made using whiskies distilled at Edgedour Distillery. So for this one I took 2 second fill sherry hogsheads distilled in 2005. One full of Edgedour, which is unpeated, one filled with Balechin, which is heavily peated, and both of them full term 16-year maturation in second fill sherry hogsheads. So you had the mix of the unpeated, the peated, and this nice, elegant, balanced sherry profile. So the result is quite a refined, but still quite peaty whiskey with a nice, slightly meaty, gamey, leathery, tobacco style sherry character there. Quite earthy, quite chocolatey, quite a big whiskey, but with nice balance and roundness as well. I'm very happy again with how this turned out, and it's another example of how we like to mix and match different casks and play around with blending to create interesting bottlings which wouldn't otherwise exist. And then from there to another very extreme whiskey, which is the KNOCKDHU 2006 heavily peated. This is a Whisky Sponge edition number 63, and this is distilled 2006, 16 years old, 55%. This was originally above 67% cask strength, this cask, so it had a lot of reduction down to 55. It's very, very pure, powerful. It's an extremely salty, almost sharp like peat flavour, so very, very narrow, very, very intense, quite an ashy smokiness about it. And it's a style which, again, is not for everyone. We often bottle whiskies which are quite extreme, and I want whiskies that we bottle to provoke a response in the taster. So this is a good example of that, although I like it. And then we have a bottling under our Equinox and Solstice series. So this is a seasonal series we do. We do it every quarter of the year, so 4 bottlings each year on the respective summer solstice or the autumn equinox or winter solstice or spring equinox. And they are, I would say, small batch single malts, bottled very naturally, always at 48.5%, and they're chosen to reflect the character of each season. So this is our summer release this year, and it was from Glengarioch Distillery. So 2 first fill barrels of 2011 Glengarioch married together and bottled at 48.5%. So this is very much about distillery character. So it expresses very clearly and very fresh Glengarioch distillery character, which is a nice bit of waxiness, quite sweet, natural barley characteristics. The first fill barrels are active, but not too active. So you get a nice balance of wood and distillery character, but very approachable, very easy. Ideal for sipping from a tumbler, or perfect in a highball, I think. It's good strength and good flavour and character. So for me, it's a perfect whiskey for a highball. And then going on from there to a whiskey that I really love. I love Glen Grant Distillery generally, and this Glen Grant is another example of how we like to play with different casks and different ages to create a unique whiskey bottling. So this was another multi-vintage bottling. It was a 1995 refill barrel of Glen Grant mixed with a 1997 refill hogshead. And the mix of the two was again something which showed the best characteristics of each cask together and created something better than the individual casks on their own. And we did this at natural cask strength as well, 49.8%. And the character of this one, I think again, it's going back to a slightly older profile of Glen Grant, and it's quite rich, quite oily, a little bit waxy, and you have some nice dry fruit characteristics in there, like aged orange peel, and you have this kind of sense of lightly smoked fruit teas. Some very nice flavour profiles going on in there, and again, I was very happy with the result of that bottling. And then last of all, but not least, is our Glenlivet 2007. This was Whisky Sponge edition number 57, And this was just a single sherry hogshead, a first fill sherry hogshead of 2007 Glenlivet. And the reason I did this is because Signatory, where we bought the cask from, have quite a lot of these casks, and many bottlers have bottled them already. But the natural strength is very, very high, and most have been done at cask strength, which I think is too extreme. They're beautiful casks. It's a very good quality modern style of sherry, this, and it shows Glenlivet very well. But the high strength ones I think are a little too much. We did this one bottled at 53%, which just brings more balance, makes the whiskey much easier, brings out more fruit flavour, nice dark fruits, soft chocolate flavours, a little bit of earthiness and rancio. Beautiful flavours, very easy to drink at this strength, and I thought just a perfectly balanced sherry bomb whiskey. So I want to say again, thank you very much to Hideo for organising the tasting. Thank you all very much for enjoying our whiskies, and I hope I can come to Japan and visit you all and see you in person someday very soon. Okay, for now, Slange from Scotland, and thank you very much.